Welcome to the Best Place to Work podcast, where we promise actionable tips from real business leaders on building amazing work cultures. Not tips from Google, but tips from the trenches of real-world businesses just like yours. Today on the podcast, I have Mike Harris, who's the CEO of Works Cited in Holland, Michigan. Now, they have been on the Inc. 5000 list for 5 consecutive years, as well as being voted West Michigan's best and brightest companies to work for 5 years in a row. So Mike is obviously up to something big. He's based in Holland, Michigan, which is just down the road from Grand Rapids, where this show is based out of, so had to have him on. Recently, he had a TEDx talk about how to lead people, how to unlock their potential, so shares a lot of insights. Excited to have him on, so welcome, Mike. Well, today on the show, I'm super excited because we have a local company, Holland, Michigan, which is right down the road from Grand Rapids, Michigan. Today on the podcast, we have Mike Harris of Works Cited in Holland, Michigan, and they are IT provider, managed service provider, and they have won the Inc. 5000 5 times in a row, and while at the same time winning multiple best places to work, ideal places to work, all those variations, but have a very good standing in the community. They do a lot to give back, and so they really have a unique thing going on over at Works Cited. So thanks for being on the show, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Mike. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we're proud to have 5 consecutive, hopefully soon to be 6 consecutive years as one of the fastest growing companies in America, and 6 consecutive years as one of the 101 best and brightest West Michigan companies, and 2 times we've won that nationally as well. So yeah, excited to be here, and yeah, I'm ready. Let's do it.
Well, thanks. Yeah. So as you know, this podcast is really meant to provide a lot of value for leaders at growing companies that are similar to Works Cited. You know, they're managing that growth pain from small to maybe mid-size level. And so I wanted to start off this episode with a little bit of a twist and ask you, what do you feel like has been your biggest failure in growing your company? Because you started it. It was, I think, your first company, unless I'm mistaken, and you guys have come a long way. And I think relatively, upward, not a lot up and down, but tell me about one of the biggest failures that you had in building the positive company culture you guys have right now.
Yeah, I would say that I'll generalize that at first and then get specific by saying I think that biggest failure is failure to sometimes take a difficult action when we know, from a cultural perspective, when we know that we have, a bad fit from a, kind of alignment perspective. We've got somebody on the team who, we made a bad hire, right? We've in the past taken too much time trying to correct that mistake, when in reality, the mistake was kind of more core than that, and we made a bad hire, and we needed to act on that. And I'll say that, we've made that decision. Not a lot of people know that, Matt and I were founders of the company, but after we founded the company, there was a time that we had a third partner. And, we kind of made that original mistake, at the partnership level. And we learned a really difficult and painful lesson about, who you bring on the team and making sure there's a fit, and then having to come back later and say, we made a mistake. And it's one thing to make that at the employee level, but when you make it at the partnership level, it can be a really, really difficult thing to get through that, a lot of companies, they don't even survive that. So, we had a third partner we had to have some difficult conversations around, and for Matt and I ultimately to say, it's best for all of us because our visions for the company are different, if we part ways.
So did that then strengthen you and Matt's, relationship going forward? I mean, did that cement saying, hey, we need to be aligned here going forward on these kind of decisions?
Absolutely. I think, Matt and I have we're kind of unique in that this partnership has just really, really worked for us. We're kind of a yin and yang type thing. We kind of keep each other in check. But what was really interesting about that is, as an entrepreneur, I mean, we both really basically pushed all, we had to make it happen. We had to basically push every chip we had on the table and go 150% all in, borrow, do what we had to do to get out of that situation. And that was an extremely risky time for us in the company. And yeah, it definitely brought the two of us together. And in the future, when the two of us have individually had challenges in our lives, it's allowed the other partners step in and really provide a lot of cover. And really it really did strengthen our bond. So
yeah, no, I think that's probably something people deal with. Either maybe they're in the midst of they need to pull that trigger to get rid of that person, not necessarily at the partner level, maybe at a management level. But so I think it's good to hear. So tell me about, you and Matt being aligned on things, and how does that translate to the company culture? I mean, if you guys are a yin and a yang, were you pretty aligned with management styles, with vision, maybe with how, dynamic you guys are as leaders, and then how does that flow down into the company culture?
Yeah, yes, I'd say we always set out to build a company that we two as individuals wanted to come to every day. And we have just done our best, to lead the company in a way that we would want to be led, and, to kind of bring that energy and let people see, we're very open, about what we have going on in the company. And Matt and I if we disagree in a meeting, like we just disagree openly. And it's like watching your parents fight sometimes and then coming to learn that there's something good about that too. Right. And but we work through it. We align ourselves. We ultimately have a ton of faith in each other and trust in each other, which really is what it's all about. At the end of the day, if Matt comes to me and says, I feel really strongly about something, Mike, I mean, that goes a long way with me, usually to the point where I'll say, okay, like, let's go with that, if that's what your gut says. So really it's about having a strong enough bond that you have really a good cushion of trust that you can kind of fall back on.
Yeah. Now, were you guys friends before you started Works Cited? Pretty strong friends?
Yeah, we were. We actually met. So we met like the first day of college in the dorm room. Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah, right. And we did. We got to be really good friends. We kind of overlap from a program perspective. We both have backgrounds in computer science. Matt was computer science business. I was computer science and math. And that's really where that bond kind of developed, working together on projects, and but yet at the same time, the fun side of college and life too. We just built this really, really strong friendship that ultimately was able to kind of convert into really a really dynamic business partnership.
Yeah, no, that's great. This podcast is proudly sponsored by Waypoint. If you want to get your team aligned and you want to go from herding cats to a well-oiled machine, and if you're sick of the annual review process, then check out Waypoint. It's an elegant tool built for leaders just like you to help you invest in your people and unlock their true potential. Head over to waypointhq.com to learn more. Well, that kind of leads me into, you guys met in college, you went and worked a couple of years, you guys had something besides Works Cited, so you had a period there, but then you guys jumped into Works Cited, and it's interesting to me how it's your first company, and so you probably learned a lot of lessons along the way. So tell me, how do you feel, where do you feel like the source of some of the things that you guys do as a company strategically, maybe as how you manage, how you set up, these things that build company culture, where do you come up with those? I mean, most times
where the hell did we get those, right?
Yeah, seriously. I mean, most times, it's people that maybe it's like their third go round or whatever. And then that's when they say, okay, we're going to do this right, because they've learned their lessons along the way. I would say most people maybe don't survive to the point of their first one to get to, where you guys are at. So kudos to that, but I'm just real curious.
Yeah. I think there's probably there's probably a few different things. We've had this conversation recently where we look back and we're like, could we replicate this, or was it just the right things coming together at the right time? And there is some of that. We like to talk about that. Entrepreneurs like to talk about return on luck, and we always think that one of our skills as partners has been when opportunity is there, we're smart enough to see it and know when there's a good risk to be taken and go for it. But I think so we worked together at Johnson Controls after college, and that was kind of the source where we said, this is kind of right at the .com, top of the .com bubble. It's 2000, and we're working together. So we see what's going on in all these huge corporations, and began to realize that there was a huge market for this in the small to mid-size company. That was kind of the genesis of the idea, and we saw all the not to knock a particular company, but all the waste and things that were going on, and realized, oh my gosh, we could take this and really make a product out of it and a business out of it. But as far as how did we learn how to manage people, personally, I learned a lot from watching my dad build his companies and watching him, I think, lead a company like a human being, right? Mm-hmm. And he didn't always make the decision that was best for him, right? And I think we learned a lot from that. Matt's family was really instrumental as well. When we started the company in his basement, I lived in his basement essentially. And his dad spent a lot of time coaching us as well and helping us understand what it takes to kind of be a good leader before we really had anyone to lead. And again, it really was this idea that we just wanted to build the kind of company and be led, and lead people in a way we would want to be led. And honestly, it's just this sounds kind of cheesy, but it's like lead with our hearts, right? And when we do that, really, really good things kind of come about.
So how do you? I think that there's a lot of truth to that, even though it sounds cliche. But how do you feel like one of the things that I talk to people in your position, and they say, well, we have a strong sense of vision for the company, a strong why, and I've heard you say that we invest in our customers and then into our people and then into our business, or something to that nature, and and don't take this the wrong way, but it's like managed IT is like, that's not super sexy. It's not like trying to change the world. But I would assume that there's some sense of, if you can show how we're affecting the customer and making them win, then your employees are more engaged and can get excited about that. So I don't know if you could speak a little bit to that.
Yep. I think that Matt and I came into this business in a really unique time, as we're kind of, both. We sit on the cusp between Gen X and the millennial, right? And so we're kind of wired in this really weird hybrid way where people that know me know that, I'm an achiever. Set me to a task and I'll go for it. But I'm not going to do it. But at the same time, I'm highly relational. So one of the things that people have always said about our organization, one of the reasons we've been successful, is the people that work here are really unique. They're extremely talented in their actual craft, but they're highly, highly relational. And it has allowed us to kind of drive these partnerships with our customers that you just don't see in our industry normally. And I think that's kind of come from just really the way Matt and I are wired. Like, we're both pretty technical people, but we're highly, highly relational. And your question is kind of one that we would call alignment, right? And it's how does a company in what you could argue is a mundane field, right? How does a plumber or any company that sells shoes, why are there some companies that just repeatedly outperform the competition, right? And all of a sudden, they kind of emerge as this outlier. And for us, it really comes down to the fact that Matt and I are really clear on why we get out of bed in the morning, right? We go to work because we are passionate about seeing the people that work for us grow. We absolutely love it. I love the fact that the person, the employee number one, past Matt and I, still works in this company today, and he is in here doing amazing things. As does 2, 3, 4, 5. These people have come alongside the company, and they just love it, right? And we get to watch them grow. And the net result of that is that when we have these people who are passionate about what we do as a company, and it lines up with our customer, that energy kind of like transfers from our employees all the way into the customer. So if you look at our typical customers, if you look across our customer base, our customers in general would be classified as very high growth. And I like to think that, we're a part of that we help drive that within them. So we really do, to your point, I think we outperform, in a field where we have a lot of competition, and we stand out because we're very deliberate, honest, and transparent about what we're passionate about, right, as leaders of the company. And then that flows all the way from the customer down to the person that we hire, and everyone in the company understands, right, how they align to that. And, I've talked in some of my other talks that it's more than just values, right? Mm-hmm. So I have this phrase, hiring on values is no longer enough. And you can't just hire somebody because we have values and we need them. And I think ours are kind of unique and cool, but it's more than that, right? You and I can value similar things, but we can still have a different set of beliefs, right? And at the end of the day, we're going to move towards the things that we believe in. And it takes a lot less management, right, and a lot less energy, because that's just where you want to go, right? And we've kind of tapped into that. So sorry, long answer to a short question, but
no, I think that's what is in the whole ethos of your company, because you're really saying it's coming down from the top, and that's, I think, so important. But they always say it's who you hire, right? And that's the old cliche phrase. But it sounds like when you guys bring people in to hire, you're looking for that alignment, at least at the core level. And then you're saying, okay, we put these people in an environment and they're going to thrive.
Yep.
Which I'm wondering, how do you support that? So what real practical things, when the rubber meets the road, it's more than just getting people that, have values and beliefs, but then what structures or systems or habits do you have to invest in your people to help them to grow, besides just maybe having goals? What other things do you guys do?
Yeah, so I would say there's I think of it like 2 layers, right? You've got the bottom layer is the stuff you have to do to support an individual's ability to do their tasks, right? So that's things like training and blah blah blah, right? Investing in the employee so they can understand how to do whatever the task level is that they need to do their job, essentially. And a lot of companies are able to figure out how to do that. A lot of companies don't even do that very well, right? But there's a whole nother layer on top of it, which is where you start to try and understand what it is that makes an employee tick, right? And these are the things this is where you get what I call outperformance, right? This is the key to where instead of having an employee who I constantly have to push and push and push so that they're giving me 85%. This is the differentiator where I'll have employees that give me 120%, right? And I don't ever have to ask them to do it. They just do it. And that part is first and foremost driven by conversations. So I think, and we constantly on a weekly basis, actually semi-daily basis probably, we're surveying our staff with automated systems, capturing information and feedback from them about their alignment within the company. So we're constantly measuring this. But we have every manager here, every single employee in our company is having one-on-one conversations on either a weekly or bi-weekly basis with their manager. And that conversation isn't just how are you doing your task. There's a whole conversation around, do you understand how your job helps fulfill the vision of the organization? In other words, do you understand, Mr. Employee, why it is that you are so critical to us? And it's this conversation. What other things do we do? we're constantly sharing. So everybody on our leadership team is responsible for a small group within the company and facilitating what we call town hall vision sharing meetings. And these happen quarterly. And so it's really dissecting the 1, 3, and 10-year visions of the company and where we want to go, sharing that with our employees, getting their feedback, right, and helping them understand why when we make a certain decision, how that builds into the vision of the company.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, making it okay for them to, any employee in this company feels comfortable, I think, marching into my office if they need to and saying, Mike, I just don't understand why we're doing this thing when you told me the other week that the vision of the company is this. So this idea of, that it's fine to question what's happening within the company, because I think if you're hiring people who believe what you believe and you're aligned, then it's okay for them to drive conversations, because if they're having conversations and asking questions, it's the birthplace of innovation, right? So in those small moments where somebody says, you say we're going here, we're doing this, let's talk about how we can do this different. That's where we innovate as a service company.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it's making them feel heard. It's giving a platform for that conversation, right? I mean, that's what I'm hearing you say. The one thing
Correct.
You said that I think is interesting, and I've heard it said before, that for every time you feel like you should tell the vision of the company or the plans or the thoughts about the future of the company to your employees, like really it's like 6 months too late. Like you should be saying that like 5 times more than you think you should verbally to your team, because so often you're saying it in your head of like, here's the plans that I have, but leaders don't, they should over communicate it, I guess, and
I'd say, in my own kind of quest of self-awareness, one of the things I've learned for myself is exactly that. I think that's a really, really smart point, and people listening to this, please, pick that up, is there are many times, and I think the people that report to me directly would say in their one-on-ones, I bring this up a lot, there's a lot of times in the past when I think I've communicated something and I absolutely have not, and the employees don't know it. So I think your point is really, really brilliant. We've come to learn, that magic number is like 7, right? So I really need to say something 7 times before, especially if it's a vision-related item. I need to say it about 7 times before our other team members really are able to kind of fully mentally process it and begin to apply it, from a tactical perspective. I may have been thinking about these things for 2 years, so they're like, kind of well seated in my mind. And, I look at somebody and think to myself, like, what do you mean you don't know anything about this? And it's like, oh, wait a minute. I didn't tell you that. You can't read my mind. Our team members aren't mind readers. And a lot of that came from, as we've grown, we've hired we hired like 30%, we grew 30% last year. And so that's a lot of new staff. And the feedback we started getting about a year ago was that we were too dependent previously on information sharing through osmosis, right? And when you're hiring your staff that fast, they just can't share. The existing staff, the core group, is so overwhelmed, right, trying to keep things together while you're bringing on new employees. They don't have time to have those like lunchtime conversations where they're really sharing the experiences, and you kind of share through osmosis. And so the feedback we were getting from the staff was that we're not clear on exactly what the vision of the company is. And so we took that feedback and now we're really, really deliberate about trying to make sure that we're sharing that constantly and repetitively. And you can't just do it once, because if you're growing fast, you're onboarding new employees all the time, right? How do you continue to do that? It's a really big challenge just to really keep your people lined up and really marching to the same drum. So
yeah, and that sounds like that's something you guys have learned over time, right? I mean, you're slowly iterating on that and getting better at it. Because I can imagine if you're stewing on something for, let's just say, even like 6 months, and you're like, hey, this is what I'm thinking for the next year. When you share it, you're naturally only going to share like a chunk of it. and they're having to piece the rest in. You've already pieced it all in over the 6-month period. So you're like, okay, now I need to open up a forum for them to share what they heard, and then I'll fill in the rest that they didn't, and that's interesting.
Yeah, you got it. It's kind of like, we show them a math problem, we show them the answer, and I don't show them any of the work that happened in between, right? And they have all these questions, which are good questions, but potentially questions that, we've already wrestled with, and we're not sharing that. So it is a challenge. Other things we've done, we love to be very entrepreneurial, and we love to have our employees operate in that same way, because again, I think if you're hiring the right people, it's okay to trust them to get stuff done and make mistakes. But we did bring in some basic kind of systems within the company that give us some basic structure. So like we implemented something they call EOS, right? So this is, if you're familiar with it, the entrepreneurial operating system, gives us some basic structure within the company from a kind of data, people, vision, traction standpoint to help us stay organized around exactly where the company's going, and scorecarding and all these things that make sure that the employees are seeing the information they need to see, and they're understanding how it is they're kind of fitting into that bigger picture. So
that's great. How long have you been doing that for?
I think we rolled out EOS going on 2 years ago, I'd say.
Okay.
And that's been that was a challenge, because anytime you do that, it really we changed the makeup of our leadership team a little bit. And anytime you have to do some of those things, they're painful. So that would be another kind of key takeaway for leaders that might be listening to this that are going through growth. It really connects to that first comment I made where I said, sometimes you wait too long to make a tough decision. And, I can say that anytime you have to shake up your leadership team, or a management team, it's not fun. But if you're doing it for the right reasons, if you're doing it to make sure that the people that you're moving around are getting into a seat where they can excel, the net result of it is usually really, really good. But when you're going through it, it's extremely painful and it feels really awkward. But in our experience, you come out the other side of it much, much better, as does your whole team. So
that's central to the core of what you've been saying, which is it's hard to make those decisions, but you got to make them. What would you say is another one of those that you maybe, Mike in 2017 would have told Mike of, right at the start of Works Cited to say, hey, you need to do this sooner than later? Maybe that EOS is one of those, but what would you say is another one?
Boy, there's a lot of things I would tell myself to do, to do differently. I would say one thing Mike would tell old Mike would be give up control sooner. If you're hiring really, really good people, when you're passionate about what you're doing, it's really hard as an entrepreneur to give up whatever the core thing is that you do, right? It's tough. But
what was that for you?
For me, it was the operational side of the business. It was hard for me to give that up because I just breathed it, and it was really tough, the doing, right? So when you're a small service company, like when we started, there was 2 of us. So you have to do everything, right? And the very core craft that you're being brought in to do, that's you're the person in there doing it. That's the thing that you don't want to give up. But I should have given it up sooner. I think in retrospect, we probably could have grown, we've kind of had this hockey stick thing, and I think we could have grown, started growing fast even sooner, had Matt, I think for Matt and I both, we've been more willing to give that up earlier. But I've come to realize that if you're hiring really, really good people and you're willing to kind of give control to them on something and trust them, they're really, really careful with things that aren't theirs. So in a talk I did, I used this analogy of letting somebody borrow your car, right? So I said, okay, so if, how do you drive a car that you borrow from your friend? Well, you drive it like really carefully because it's their car, right? Probably more carefully than you drive your own car, which is also how your friend drives their car. So the net result of your friend trusting you to drive their car is their car was actually safer for the day because you actually take better care of it than they do. And there's this like really simple business leadership principle in there where it's like jet fuel. If you're hiring these people and you're aligning and you just let them, you give them some boundaries, but just let them, trust them to make mistakes, because they really care a lot more than you probably even realize about your business. It's like jet fuel. You can just get so much more done, right? So that's another little like nugget that I've learned is just get the hell out of their way, basically.
Yeah. And you think that people don't do that because they want to stay in that, like, the doing part? I mean, obviously it's a lack of trust maybe, but do you think there's a lot to that? What you said is like, you want to be in the operation, you want to be in the weeds because that's what you started doing, or that's where you feel the most like in your element, so to speak. But what we really need to do as the CEO or co-founder is like, you need to be at a strategic level. You need to empower your team. So, I mean, is that the hard part?
Yeah, I think that there's the bigger your company starts getting, there's this, every day I'm running the biggest company I've ever ran. Okay. So I'm right at the edge all the time, right? It's always something new. And there's a certain amount of comfort and assurance in the aspects of the business that, from the operational perspective that maybe you started with, that it's safe, right? And I do think some of it's trust, right? Because it's not that you don't, to say you don't trust the people that work for you is probably a little bit extreme, but it needs to be done the way I do it, right? And customers want Mike to come in and do this work. And I love the fact that I don't ever hear that anymore, because no customer wants me to come in and fix their stuff anymore, because I would be the wrong person to have do it. But I'm the right person, right? Because I'm the right person to drive the company to the next level. And I'm the person who embodies, right, that spark that helps start the company. Matt and I both, we embody that spark together that help drive the company to the next level. That's what he and I need to be doing. We have to be spending our time, because I owe it to the 70 people that work for us, for every kid in the company. There's I'm focusing all over this thing, right? And you begin to realize, you kind of wake up one morning and you go, all these people are responsible. My own family, I owe it to them. And Matt owes it to them to make sure that we are focused on continuing to grow this organization and create opportunity for them. And if I do that and do it well, they give me their best work every day. And my customer ultimately is far better served than, and we grow 10 times faster than we would if I did it the old way, so to speak. So
I like that. That's really cool, especially having the kids. It's not just your employees, because it's all that, the level underneath that. It's all the families. It's all that,
Yeah, it's really, it's kind of a like freaky feeling,
Yeah, that's right. I can imagine. So, is there anything else you wanted to share before we wrap up here, Mike?
I would just say to those folks that are building, growing companies and taking those risks, that make decisions faster than you think you should. That's a mistake we made. We take too long to make a decision, and sometimes a bad decisions, is better than no decision or a slow decision. And do the things that feel uncomfortable sometimes. When everybody is buying, you should probably be selling. And when everyone is selling, you should probably be buying. If you want to be exceptional, you can't do the same thing everybody else does, or you by definition are not exceptional. And so it's a really simple principle to keep in mind. Have faith in yourself, hire people that you trust, get advice, and just go do it. Like, don't be afraid. So
well, that's great. Thanks so much for being on the show, Mike.
You're welcome. Thanks, Mike.
Thanks so much for listening. If If you found the show valuable, please give us some love on iTunes. But if there's any reason that you would rate us less than 5 stars, please let me know. Shoot me a note at mike@bestplacetoworkpodcast.com. Thanks.